Welcome to From College Student to Entrepreneur to Professor. We are so excited. I'm so excited to be here with Jeff Noël today, who I met when he was a college student and is coming to us from FIU in Miami, where he's surrounded by his students. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello,
Oh,
hello,
we want
hello.
show
Welcome,
us that again.
everyone.
Woohoo!
We gotta make some noise. All right, we gotta do that. Make some noise. Ready, set, ready. Woo! Hand back.
All right, what class is this?
This.
And who are you?
My name is Jeff Noël. I'm a professor here at FIU, the finest institution in the. All right, the finest institution in the universe, and I teach public speaking, and we're excited to be here.
Awesome. So, a little backstory. I met Jeff about 10 years ago when I was running the UCF Launchpad. So, Jeff, give us just a little bit of the big picture. Tell us a little bit about when I met you, what you were up to, and then scroll fast forward what you're up to today.
Yeah. When you met me, I was a student at Valencia College, and I had this desire for entrepreneurship because when I was in middle school, I used to run a side business when I would sell chips, candies, chocolate, grandma cookies, Capri Suns, Twix, everything. I was a walking corner store, and it was a very successful business, I must say. And when I was at Valencia College, I also had a business it was called Noel's Moving and Delivery. And I knew that wasn't my end game business. I knew I wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur one day. I knew I wanted to have a multi-billion dollar business, but I didn't have any strong ideas, nor did I have a lot of direction. And then my sister, who you know, Makisha, she told me about the Blackstone Launchpad at UCF. And I wasn't a student at UCF, but I was living at a housing unit with UCF students. And so there was this free shuttle from Alafaya where I stayed to UCF. And she told me, I think at that point, every Wednesday there was a special speaker that would come in and speak. And so I started going to the Blackstone Launchpad because there was a lot of good information that was being shared there. People were speaking about getting an LLC. I'm not sure if I fully knew what that meant at the time.
Yeah.
People were speaking about all aspects of business. And my goal, my mission was to learn more about business because I knew very little, although I've dabbled in it a few times. And from there, fast forward to where I am now, I am a full-time professor at FIU, but I also have my own businesses. So I have an organization called Barbershop Speaks, where we host intelligent discussions inside barbershops and beauty salons. And we've actually been doing that for 10 years now. I have an organization called Jefferson Noel and Associates. That's my speaking business where we speak around the country and around the world as well. And also our money is made through speeches, and I've written 5 books and about 10 workbooks as well. So
Wow, you've just been, resting on your laurels the
yeah.
last couple years. So we're going to get into all of that. And we're super psyched that your students are with us because I love this idea of I met your professor when he was just like you. He was a student. And there's some funny stories. I'm going to try to give you some stuff you can use in the future
Don't
on
say all the funny stories, Pam.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about this. Your first venture when you were coming over to the Launchpad and I met you. Let's walk through that journey. What was it? Kind of how did it start? Because you've had an interesting journey so far, but how did the first one take off?
Yeah. So when I moved to Orlando, I didn't have any money. I think I moved to Orlando with maybe $264. And my first day moving to Orlando, I learned something very quickly, is that I needed groceries. So I spent most of that money at Walmart buying Chef Boyardee and Cheez-Its, a whole bunch of random stuff. And then I told myself I didn't want, at the moment, I didn't want to work a job because if I worked at, let's say, Taco Bell or McDonald's, then I would get paid minimum wage. So I said, ask myself, what business can I start that can earn me a lot of money quickly? And it will be more than minimum wage. So at the time, I was driving a Ford F-150. And I said, college students, they probably need help moving between semesters. And when I moved to Orlando, it was the summertime. So I knew end of spring, students were moving out. So I decided to start Noel moving and delivery. I went to Walmart with the little money I had. I purchased one of those pens that you could write on the window. I wrote, do you need help moving? And I put my full phone number for the entire world to see.
And
And
you were in business.
I was
So
in business.
you had ramp, what we call ramp. You had some income coming in so you could stay alive. Now
Correct.
you came to the launch pad, and I remember looking at you and going, why is he never getting coaching? Because we ran things every day, and I would see you sitting there every day. And I asked you one day, why aren't you getting any coaching? And you're like, I don't go to the school. And right then I knew, students, that this guy was motivated because he was coming from another campus. So we changed it so any student in the area could come in and get services. So what did you start working on there? And talk to us a little bit about the process. What did you really do to get that first gig? What was your first idea, and how did you get the first gig? What happened?
Yeah, the idea was I need to put myself out there. I obviously didn't have a lot of money to do marketing. I didn't have any money to do marketing really, so I wasn't able to do any Facebook ads. I didn't have a lot of relationships in the area, so I couldn't leverage any of those relationships to get into the ecosystem to tell people about my moving business. So the only thing I could do at the time was purchase a pen that cost a couple dollars and write on the car, and I had to hope that people would see it and call me. And
So when you came in, you were doing the moving business, but I think you started working on your public speaking right away.
oh
Or
yeah,
okay, so talk to us about how that took off.
yeah. So with public speaking at the time, at the time in 2014 when I started when I moved to Orlando, that's when I started public speaking, and I wasn't good at it at all. I wanted to be great at.
This is a really critical thing. We were just talking about this. Nobody is good at anything they start. They're actually pretty crappy. And you just have to hold a lot of space for not being good at it and just have some courage, right? Okay, so you weren't that good at it. And what happened as you were part of the Launchpad community? What was the process there?
Yeah, so I learned about de-risking. I learned about what's my value proposition. I learned about finding my sweet spot because at the time I was thinking about how can I make money, but then when I got to the launch pad, there was a different orientation where it wasn't only about how can you make money, but how can you also do what you love? How can you also do what you love? How can you also help others? And how can you also bring value to the lives of people and make money doing it? And it was in that moment I learned about sweet spot and how you can actually become successful doing what you love while helping others.
Yeah, and I think that this is like a narrative that's out there that you've got to hate what you're doing and that you can't choose something you love, right?
Mhm.
And what would you say to anyone that's thinking that right now?
Yeah. When you do what you love and you become intentional about becoming an expert in what you love, people will pay for your expertise. Because oftentimes we tell people that there's no one else doing this, or just because you love it, that doesn't mean people will pay for it. Well, there's someone that's wealthy from doing it. There's someone who is experienced in that field. There's someone who's doing that full time, and that's because they put in the 10,000 hours, they put in the 15,000 hours to become great at what they did. And so loving it is not enough. You have to love it and you have to work on it to become better at it and to become an expert in that field. And people will pay for someone's expertise.
Talk to us about the de-risking process. Some of us understand what that is. Can you break it down on this the second venture you did? What did
Yeah.
you do that got you to it starting?
Yeah. When I decided I want to get into public speaking, again, I didn't have an audience. I wasn't that good at it. And so obviously I wouldn't get any calls to go and speak. Obviously not. And if I wanted to get paid to speak or get in front of an audience, what I would have to do, what most people would have to do is they would have to pay for a venue, they would have to pay for marketing, and they would have to find a way to get a bunch of people in the room. So what the de-risking process looked for me, what it looked like for me was because I was a student, I said, how can I leverage the school that I go to in order to do what I want to do without having to pay any money? And so essentially with de-risking, yes, you take action, but you take less risk as you are taking that action. And so instead of having to pay for someone to do my graphics, I went to the school and I said, hey, I have a full-time staff who does graphics. Can they do it for me? Instead of having to pay for a room, I went to the Student Government Association and they sponsored a room for me. Instead of having to pay for food, I asked them if they could cover the food for me because food draws people into the room because I need an audience, right? And then also I had to think about how can I get in front of as many people as possible, especially powerful people who's able to potentially book me for a gig or start speaking about me in other rooms. And so the event that I did, which you attended, and I'm still deeply grateful for that, you attended an event called Same Story, Different Title. What can we do to rewrite history? And at the event, I invited amazing community leaders like yourself, like Wayne, like Gigi Mormon, and you all had a seat at the table in the event. And so the event cost me practically nothing, but the impact was grand. And that was one of the launch pads to help me get to where I am now.
Yeah. So this whole thing of customer discovering and your rapid prototype was your first event. And
Correct.
you offered it, the value you offered to Valencia when you sold it to them was what?
It was, we're going to get people in the room. We're going to speak about something that matters, that the community cares about. We're going to bring influential people from the community into the school because that's something that universities care about. They want the world to see that students are not only staying within the four walls of the classroom, but there's people who are experts coming into the room as well. So it definitely was a great look for Valencia.
Yeah, so this whole idea there's multiple types of capital, right? So early on, we're trying to reduce our risk and minimize the capital money we're spending, but we might be leveraging other social capital and network capital. So all of a sudden, you've got all these decision makers and people that could hire you for a speaking thing in the room with no money in, just work. So now let's talk about how that takes off. You're using de-risking, you're using rapid prototyping, you're in your sweet spot. Now how does Barbershop Speak start? Take us to
Right.
that.
Barbershop Speaks. Yes. So Barbershop Speaks started because after I graduated from Valencia College, I knew I wanted to move down to Miami to attend FIU and not UCF.
Because,
I don't know if I want to say it.
yeah, tell the truth.
Okay, you want me to tell the truth? Okay. So I actually moved. Don't laugh at me, everybody. I actually moved. The real reason why I went to FIU, I didn't know how great it was at the time. But while I was while I was in Orlando, I actually got a new girlfriend.
Yeah, it was all about a girl. And if you guys want to talk to Jeff about something, every time he came into the launch pad, he'd have a different book under kind of tucked in here,
Yeah.
but it'd be showing the title and it'd be a different book. And so pretty soon I figured out that he just picked books and walked around campus to look smart. And it was kind of one of his dating strategies. And he was always using a different book as a like, oh, you're reading that book anyway. So you moved down to Miami, not because of FIU, though you love FIU, for a girl. And how does Barbershop Speaks and how does it connect with what you had been practicing at the Launchpad?
Yeah, so when I moved back to Miami, I knew I wanted to start something, especially because I was in the entrepreneurial ecosystem for so long in Orlando. I knew I wanted to start something, but I didn't have a clear idea exactly what I wanted to do. But I knew I did desire to be around community. I knew that I wanted to have intelligent conversations. And so, in thinking about de-risking, one of my ideas was maybe I'll just sit in a Starbucks and put up a sign that says intelligent conversations here. But then I was like, I might look a little weird just sitting in Starbucks with a sign like that. And then one day I was getting a haircut, and there was this big argument on who's better, LeBron James or Stephen Curry.
Yeah.
And everyone knows who's the GOAT. LeBron James, all right? Everyone knows LeBron James is the greatest of all time. And but this conversation, it was so energized, it was so vibrant. And I asked myself, what would happen if we use the same energy, but to speak about things that actually matter?
Mm.
And it was in that seat, the idea of Barbershop Speaks immediately came to mind. And so there's the concept that we learn in entrepreneurship called fail fast. You know, in the world, people think failure is inherently a bad thing, but in entrepreneurship, failure is a way to learn what not to do, right? And so in that thinking of failing fast, I said, okay, who can I speak to immediately? So as the guy was cutting my hair, I turned to him. I said, hey, I have this idea, literally just thought of the idea 2 seconds prior. I have an idea. What do you think if after the barbershop closes, people come in and we have a conversation about something that's important? And he said, I think it's a great idea. He said, speak to the owner. I stood up after the haircut and I spoke to the owner. The owner said yes. I put a date on the calendar. I created a I created a flyer. It's probably one of the ugliest flyers you'll ever see in your life. But I created a flyer and that was preparation for our first event.
And we call that rapid prototype, right? Rapid prototype. We're just going to test it with minimal amount of anything in. And and you're right in the middle of your sweet spot. So I want to dive into Barbershop Speaks, but I want for a minute, you're you are a young professional that has had quite a bit of variety in your career.
Mhm.
Multiple books, multiple speaking. You're going to go to Nigeria and speak internationally next week. You have been running a nonprofit for 10 years. You are a professor.
Mhm.
When you think about it, what was it about your upbringing? What happened in your life that gave you the kind of permission to take the kind of actions you're taking to design your life?
Yeah. Well, thank God I wasn't the only entrepreneur in my family. So growing up, my dad, he also had entrepreneurial ambitions. And one thing that I observed in his life that I also value in my life is my dad really valued freedom. And he truly believed that entrepreneurship is a way to freedom. And one specific example, and I didn't realize this. I did not realize this when I started Barbershop Speaks. But one thing that my dad did was he used to be a barber, right? He used to be a barber. And so growing up, I would be in the barbershop every Saturday. I promise you, when I started Barbershop Speaks, I didn't even think about this. I used to be in a barbershop every Saturday. But the thing is, in the barbershop, a lot of times you're sitting around doing nothing. When a customer comes in, people fight over the customer, da da da. So my dad actually he built a barbershop in our backyard. He built a barbershop in our backyard, and he like took the garage because we had a really big garage. He cut it in half. He put up a wall. He repainted everything. He laid down tile and everything, and he created a barbershop. So we had a barbershop in our house, and he would take his clients, and his clients would come to the back to do their hair. And I didn't, in my obviously when I was younger, I didn't know the word entrepreneurship, but he was an entrepreneur, and
Yeah.
did that because he wanted his freedom of time. And so seeing that growing up, I think that went inside of me to say, hey, this is something I can do. I can also start something.
Yeah. Time and control. I think more and more when we look at the world the way it is, we can all ask ourselves, if the world was how I wish it would be, how it could be, what would be different? And that sometimes is where your calling is. That's the problem or the opportunity you're supposed to work on. It's feeling inspired to step out and do the smallest thing in that area. Talk to us about how you got your first donor. So you do your first thing at Barbershop Speaks. How do you get the first monies, the first sponsorship? Tell us a little bit about that journey. Because everyone's like, how am I going to get the money to do this? I go out and I de-risk it. I join a program like How to Start Something. I work at the FIU startup. I got my idea, I try to prototype it with no money, but then how do I move to that first client, to getting money, to getting revenue, or to getting donors?
Yeah. So I've gotten donors in a lot of different ways.
The first one, I want to know about the first one.
The first one. So the first one, it was actually my second or third Barbershop Speaks conversation. When we had our first dialogue, we spoke about what is the state of the community. Obviously, that's very broad. But within that conversation, there was a lot of talk about education and how the role education plays in the lives of the youth and how education will lead to future success. And so there were people disgruntled about formal education, and there was a debate about informal education. So I knew our next topic would have to be on education because there was a demand.
Right.
But around the time when we started that conversation, the school year was just starting up. So I
Okay.
said, I should give out free school supplies. So I put it out there, hey, we're going to have a dialogue on education and I'm giving out free school supplies. Well, people started reaching out to me and said, hey, I also would like to donate. I would like to donate book bags. I would like to donate pencils and crayons and all of these other items. And I was shocked. I didn't know people were so generous. And those were the first donations we received was school supplies for students. Now,
All
it,
right. Now,
now,
how does that dovetail to you asking for donation or sponsorship money for
yeah,
Barbershop Speaks?
yeah, because at the end of the day, a lot of companies that sponsors you, they want to make sure that you are going to do right by them. They want to make sure that you're going to take the money and you're going to put it towards something that's actually useful, right? And so the that experience it helped to prove that there was a demand for the work that I was doing. It proved that it was something that went beyond just conversation, but there was some action that was taking place. And so I had pictures, I had videos of everything that we were doing. And then I started reaching out to sponsors to say, hey, do you want to continue to help the community? So it wasn't something like, hey, I'm starting something. Can you give me money so I can start it? They saw that something was already in motion. They saw that they were a part of the continuation of something good that was already happening. Because if I just went to them from scratch without having any evidence of any good that I've
Yeah.
done, it would have been a lot more difficult.
Okay, so tell us, what have you learned running a nonprofit for the last 10 years? What would your advice be to the young man that started that? What would you do now if you were starting one?
Ooh, I would get my LLC and 501c3 much sooner because I did wait a long time before I got my 501c3 and I did wait a long time before I got my LLC and there were companies that wanted to contribute but they only would contribute to a 501c3 or there were some companies they were indifferent and so it might be faster if they contribute to the LLC part of
Yeah.
the company and there was a lot of grants that I missed out on because I wasn't incorporated. And so that was and I must say I didn't have those things not because I didn't know to have them, it was just neglect. And I would tell myself to be more intentional about creating those business entities. But then another thing, and I speak to you about this, Pam, was I would tell myself to do better at data tracking because that's something I've been historically bad at is capturing the data of everyone in the room. Because sometimes you could show pictures and videos, but the company will say, "Oh, that's cute," but how many people did you serve already? And if you
Right.
hardcore number, if you're just hemming and hawing and guessing, then you seem unserious.
Right. We want outcomes. Like we want to see outcomes, right? And not just maybe who showed up, but what came from it. I think you said that before. What was the most profound moment you've had in Barbershop Speaks?
Ooh, there were so many profound moments. One time, okay, I'll share two quick moments. One moment was the first time we got into national news that was around that NPR. They came and they covered one of our events, and it went around the country. And I started to receive emails about how the work that I'm doing is important. And I thought that was amazing. I was like, I'm getting a email from someone from Oregon. I'm in Miami. They're all the way in Oregon. That was crazy. I thought that was a very special moment. But another moment that I knew we were doing something big was, I believe it was 2018 during the governor's race. There were people running for governor reaching out to me to
Wow.
come into Barbershop Speaks. That's when I knew something was up. And I felt that was very special to have people at that level coming to my events.
That's awesome. So, talk to me about the hardest moment. You've been designing not just a venture, not just one thing, you've been designing a life.
Mhm.
Can you share one of the hardest moments on this journey in the last 10 years and how you got through it?
Yeah, one of the hardest moments, I want to say, was a few years ago. As you know, my dad has been the biggest inspiration for me in life, and his fingerprints are on everything that I do, whether it's Barbershop Speaks, whether it's public speaking. Everything that I do is a reflection of things that I saw him do. And in 2022, he was diagnosed with cancer.
Mm.
And to witness a man that I love and care about so deeply suffer unimaginable pain, that was definitely the worst moments of my life. And it was in those moments I saw his resolve, because you never truly know someone's character until they're tested. You never truly know what someone believes until they're in a moment when that belief is inconvenient. And it was in those extremely difficult moments, my dad could have been selfish and said, Jeff, I want you to be next to me 24/7 because I don't know how long I have left. But my dad was saying, I want you to continue to do the work. I don't want you to stay next to me every single second. I want you to go out and speak. I want you to go out and do the events. I want you to continue the work that you're doing. And that really spoke volumes to me, because it shows that you can have a lot of strength and resolve even when your body is physically weak.
Your dad, the legacy has in you, like the blessing that you had that father, and then I I know that he's got to be amazingly proud. What would you say to someone that hasn't had a parent or a mentor or a coach like that? What would you say to them right now?
Mm. There's people who care deeply about you and they're ready and willing to pour into you. Because, yes, my father is probably the greatest influence in my life. I also have other influences. I also have other people in multiple areas of my life. I mean, you know this, Pam, I have a mentor for everything. I have a mentor for business, for relationships, for a career, for spirituality, everything. And there's always someone for every area of your life. But it does take a lot of intention in order to find those people and to build with them. And one of the things, or the main thing that I've learned from you, Pam, is give, 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 ask.
Mm.
Because when you find that mentor, when you find someone that's willing to pour into you, you have to be intentional about pouring into them. And I think with that mutual relationship of authentic reciprocity, it'll help you to grow greatly in life.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. We talk a lot about customer acquisition and growing is hard. And I think today I was talking to an entrepreneur and she said, everything's hard. If I knew how hard it was, I don't know if I would have done it. But the idea that we get to choose our hard, that we get to choose the hard that we invest our life in, because someday we will be taking our last breath.
Yeah.
So, those dreams that are whispering in people that are watching this right now, the dreams that we get, right? The things that we think might be possible, a lot of them demand that we get a client, or we get a donor, or we get a sponsor, or we get this shot with some kind of economic money around something to make the difference. What have you been learning in your public speaking career about customer acquisition and how you use the de-risking process to do that faster so that you can do what you dreamed of?
You, I used to think that everyone who needed a speaker was my customer. And I wasted a lot of time with that thinking because not everyone who needs a speaker have money to pay for a speaker. And a lot of my speaking business, I was giving a lot of free speeches and I was reaching out to a lot of people who didn't even have a budget to have me speak. And what I had to learn was not everyone who needs your service is a customer. Only someone who has the money to pay you and they need your service is a customer. And it's so I finally learned that. And I started reaching out to organizations that were well funded to bring me in to speak. And I've diverted all of my attention, energy, marketing, post, you name it, diverted it into their intention, into their inboxes. And that's helped me to grow my speaking business.
You've also niched down on the target. You've really identified a problem and a pain that you are a solution for, which is really critical. You wrapped it up as value proposition, but sometimes we're being so wide. So right now, the people that want to hire you, what's their problem or the opportunity you're going to solve?
Yeah. The problem is these are first generation low income students, so they don't have any true guidance on how to finish college. The solution is to teach them the tools for success in order for them to finish. And that's where I come in because I was a first generation student. My parents didn't graduate with a bachelor's degree, and I also did not come from money. And so I speak about the strategies and tools that I use in order to finish college.
Awesome. So the things that you've learned, like if you were, which of course you will be, writing a book right now, and it was going to go to anyone that's sitting on the sidelines, anyone that's listening us right now that has a dream,
Mhm.
but that also has voices in their head saying, well, that's for everybody else, not you. Why,
Mhm.
why you? Why would I succeed at this? What are some of the critical things that you would encourage them to do?
Yeah. I want to say they have to understand that big is not always greater than small.
Mm.
Explain what that means. When people think about starting a business, they think of rapid growth. They want to reach 100 million quickly. But in reality, if you grow, for most people, not everyone, but if you grow too fast, then everything would fall and cave in quickly. And so you have to do what you want to do, but on a smaller level first. You have to test with in low risk environments. So that goes to when I did my first event, completely free, didn't cost any money, but I put myself out there. I went on stage and I started speaking. I started on a small level, and now that has helped to teach me what to do, what not to do. So now when I'm on bigger stages, I'm able to move better. So
Start small.
start small.
Don't wait to start, but start and start
Correct.
small.
Correct.
Don't be scared of starting small.
Correct. Exactly. So I wouldn't.
Anything else you would say on that?
Ooh, I mean, even so, another thing I'll say is, and this goes to knowing your customer as well. Not everyone is your customer, and that might include your best friend. That might include your siblings.
Your parents, your
That might,
advisor, your mentor.
you might start a business, and your parents is not your customer. Just because they love you, that doesn't mean they should buy your product because your product may not be good for them.
Hmm.
So you have to understand that not everyone is the enemy just because they doesn't but just because they don't buy your product. And that's something I think a lot of people they get discouraged in the early stages of entrepreneurship because all of their friends didn't buy whatever it is that they're starting. It's like, yo, I don't need it. And a lot of people are budgeting, and if it's not in their budget, they won't pay for it. If it's not useful for them, then they won't pay for it. And so don't
Yeah.
get discouraged if the people around you in your immediate circle are not super supportive in the moment that you start.
Yeah, find your people. I think on college campuses, there's always a community working on ideas.
Mhm,
And you don't have to be into the, I want to be a startup, scalable tech,
mhm,
be exhausted and kind of go after VC money mentality. You could be, I want to change my community with a nonprofit, or you could be, I want a side income, or I just want to get control of my life. So if
mhm,
you're a student, there's lots of places on campus to work on your ideas. And
right.
that doesn't mean you're saying I'm not going to have a job. It says both, and I'm going to take control of getting to my dreams one way or the other. I'm going to be CEO of my life. That's what we do at How to Start Something. We do what college kids have really access to for adults, professionals that are at that point of they never practice de-risking. They've got great skills, but they want to either get a side income, more income, or they want to make a jump to something that's more meaningful or get control of their life. So we're doing that process now, what we did at the Launchpad over at the How to Start Something Accelerator. If you're a professional and you're thinking about that, get on over there. I'll say something else about it. But so if I know we want to get to some questions, I would love to know, what do you know now
Mhm.
about going after your dreams, about designing your life, and about building economic engines that you didn't know then?
I didn't know how much people will appreciate someone who's action oriented. I thought people wanted to see perfection on the onset, but in reality, people are inspired by imperfect people because imperfect people remind them of themselves. And in that moment, when people realize that you're just someone trying to make it just like them, they're more inclined to support you, even when you don't do everything perfectly on the onset.
That's so true. I say you have to like just actually take, you have to allow your ego just to go away when you start starting things,
Yeah.
because you have to have that beginner mindset and say, I'm going to be really, this is going to be a really shooty draft. I'm just going to go out and try. This is practice.
Mhm.
Jeff says he doesn't believe in failure. I believe in everything is learning. There
Mhm.
is no F word. There's errors, there's corrections, and there's total learning. And if you can engage that mindset, you can master anything. You just have to be humble enough to get out there when you're really shooty at things and start trying,
Yeah.
because that's the only way you get to someday and you go, oh, I'm not that bad at it. People now, I can add a lot of value.
Yeah.
All right. I would love to segue now into some questions. We'll have time for a summary right at our end, but um, I think your students should be the first one to get to ask questions. So,
Let's do it. Let's do some rapid fire questions. What y'all got for me?
What's the most effective way to start a business?
Ooh, yes. What is the most effective way to start a business? All right. So, what I learned in the Launchpad and what I learned with the UPAM is you need to have an MVP. And most people think MVP stands for most valuable player. And it also does because LeBron is always the MVP. But it also stands for minimum viable product. And essentially, what a minimal viable product is a so imagine it's like if I'm a person, right, and I have a shadow is a representation of who I am. So it's not exactly my flesh and not exactly me, but it's a representation of who I am. And so if I want to start a coffee business, the first thing I'm not going to do is purchase a coffee shop. The first thing I'm going to do is create a coffee stand. And a coffee stand is a representation of what the greater coffee shop is. So I could sell coffee to people walking down the street with the coffee stand without having to put $50,000 into getting a coffee shop. I could spend $50 by getting a stand and buying some coffee. And so one of the most effective ways
right.
to
And
business.
you might actually just go rent half of a farmer's market table with another vendor and start selling the coffee right out of there and not even have the coffee stand. So it's like, what's the simplest thing? Sometimes the MVP, right, Jeff, is that I can just make a PowerPoint, or I could go to Canva and make one picture of something. We didn't talk about customer discovery, because I would say we would have had customer discovery. We really understand the problem, the target market. Now we could come back to them with an offering, a flyer like you did to your donors, and say, hey, if I do this, how would you respond to this? And that's what we call rapid feedback. No money in the game, no skin in the game, and we're learning rapidly.
Yep.
And people either start coming around it, and you haven't started. The last thing you do is start a LLC. The last thing you do is go create a website. I mean, maybe today, if you can create you can vibe up one page, you could use it as a prototype with AI and start getting rapid feedback. Right? We'd want you to know about the clients, but absolutely.
Yep.
Fast MVP.
Yep.
What's the next question over there, FIU?
Yes.
So, if you had a plan B, business didn't go as planned, what would it be?
She asked me if I had a plan B, if the business didn't go as planned, what would it be? That's a great question. As an entrepreneur, you get used to taking L's, right? Losses. Like, that's a part of the game. And I didn't share this part of my story, but when I first went to college, the first college I went to wasn't Valencia College, it was Miami-Dade College, and I actually dropped out of school to start a business. And that business was, I was selling healthy products out of a storefront, and it was a lot of money for rent. People were not coming into the store to buy the products, and I wasted a lot of money on inventory. And that business failed after 4 months, and I had to close the doors of that business on my birthday. And that was a failure, but I had to pick myself back up and start again. So what would I have started if Barbershop Speaks failed, or if my speaking business didn't go anywhere? Well, by many definitions, for a long time, my speaking business technically did not go anywhere because I wasn't making a lot of money. So, but because I was de-risking, I wasn't expending a lot of money to make the business happen. So I was able to sustain it.
And you were becoming a better speaker, even if you weren't making money. Like if you don't have the skill, then you got to develop the skill. If you don't have the credibility or the authority or the cachet, then you got to develop that, right? Especially in some of these niches.
Mm-hmm. Right. Question.
Okay, hold that question. David, do you have any questions from your side, from YouTube or anywhere else? I don't know if David can hear me. He might still be off. He doesn't look like he can. I see one question. Jeff, what's your vision for Barbershop Speaks? What's next?
Ooh, my vision for Barbershop Speaks is to essentially have barbershop chapters around the United States of America. So every major city, every month would have a conversation, would have an event speaking about things that actually matter, that's specific to their city. Because what's pertinent to Miami right now is very different from what's pertinent to Tulsa, Oklahoma right now. It's different than what's happening in New York right now. But then also I see us going on an international stage, like what we're doing next week. We'll be having our first international event in Nigeria. And so I'm excited for Barbershop Speaks International. And I could see us doing what we've been doing in Miami all these years with the conversations, with putting bookshelves inside barbershops. I can see us doing that around the world as well.
Okay, and chapters?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
See,
if anyone's interested, would they reach out to you about starting a chapter in their town?
absolutely. Barbershopspeaks.com, or you can reach out to us on our Instagram at Barbershop Speaks, and we'll be more than happy to start the conversation.
All right. We'll make sure that's in the notes. Question on your site from FIU students.
Yes. Turning the camera.
So my question was, how do you go about the process of scaling a business once you have something that's already up and running? Like when you have that small base, that coffee stand, how do you scale it up to the shop?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll answer part, and Pam, I'll let you jump in after me. There's definitely, you have to create systems. You have to figure out what worked and how can I duplicate it. Because sometimes, because we are successful in something, we say, okay, I was successful, let me put my all into it now. But you don't even know why you were successful. What was a specific reason that customer came in and bought something? And if you don't truly understand that, then it'll be hard to duplicate that sell. It'll be hard to duplicate that success. So once you understand what the specific success was, then you'll build a system around it so you could keep duplicating so you could scale. I
Yeah.
learned something from you, Pam. I learned something from you.
Preach it, teach it, let's go. Everybody's got to know it. I think a couple things to think about. Absolutely everything Jeff said. And are you working on anything right now? Are you working on an idea or business at all?
I'm not a businessman. I'm only on the side of going to school. I'm just getting my pilot's licenses at the moment.
Ooh, I love that. So the whole aviation is going to be so interesting. There's so many things. We have some UCF entrepreneurs that are looking at actually owning or leasing aircraft, and some of the new things that are happening in that vertical. So in any vertical you're interested, there's going to be opportunities to create value. So when I think about scaling it, what we think about is you've gotten to some point, an inflection point, where we usually say you're past break even and you're starting to have lots of repeated clients, right? You don't scale before you've gotten customer acquisition to what we call, you actually have your pipeline is full of clients. There's a demand. Once we see that, then it's all about team. It's going beyond you. It's team and, like Jeff said, processes and systems, right? So that you can now turn what maybe you've been doing 3 or 4 or 5 jobs and you have 1 or 2 other contractors in. Now, if you're going to take it to the next level, how are you going to make sure that every single client's a raving fan if you start serving 10,000 more? What has to be in place? So it's about infrastructure, right? And it's about people. And sometimes businesses go out of business because they grow too fast. So I can go out of business because I don't take off and I run out of time, money, or motivation. But the other problem is growing too fast and you didn't get a good foundation or your systems in. So amazing question. Another question over there?
My class is over, but I do have one last question. So you were talking about our professor's achievements, and he seemed very proactive, which is someone that I am, especially when he was high school. But now in college, like life is getting a little bit like sidetracked. We have a lot going on. How did you deal with like the balance? You know, if you are a go-getter, but you know, life sometimes makes it difficult to be like, okay, I have a big to-do list. How do I get things done without experiencing burnout?
You asking me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh my God. So the beautiful thing about being in your sweet spot is, yes, you can still burn out, but because you're doing what you love, you don't burn out as fast. And that's what I found. And my personality, I don't want to go into the big 5 personality traits, but I'm high in industriousness, which means I'm more inclined to work very hard. It takes me a long time to burn out. And I also was willing to risk not having balance in life. And so I was imbalanced for a long period of time in order to find balance where I am now. And so there is that part where you might have to be willing to risk some things in order to get to where you are. Now, I still had a firm foundation of friendships, but those communication that I had with my friends saying, hey, we can't spend as much time with each other these next 6 months because I'm writing my book and I have to finish. And so that has helped me to not having burnout.
Yeah, and I would say it's a great question because the mental health part of this is real, like, right? What are you going to say yes to and what are you going to say no to when? Because it's not that you can't do everything, but it's probably you can't do everything all at once.
That's a
So
bar.
what's your priority right now, right? And if you really have something burning and in college you want to be starting something, then you've got to say, what can I say no to so I can say yes to the other thing?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's coming back, Jeff, you talked about having a dream for your life, having a clear vision of what you want your life to be like.
Yeah.
And then those things that are important to you, those need to become priority, whatever your age is. I could be, somebody could be getting Social Security, and if they still have a dream in their life, they better be creating time blocks for it, or it's not going to happen. And
Yeah.
if you're 18 or 20 and you have a dream, well, how much of your time and energy is it getting?
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that I learned from you is time blocks. I had no idea what that was. I thought you could be sporadic with when you did something, but if you're not focused and intentional about saying I'm setting aside these 2-3 hours to accomplish this specific task, then you'll accomplish nothing.
Yeah, your time is like, right, your time and your money. If you want to say what's important to me, go look at how you're spending your money and your time.
That's
And
right.
remember, you're CEO of all of us are CEO of that. We have control of that, right? Okay, I know there's some other questions over there. Anybody else?
Yeah. They're looking at me, they're like, this is over.
Make this go away. All right. Okay, so last question for Jeff, and then we'll wrap it up. Thank you, FIU students. I know you're staying over class a little bit, but I appreciate this. And you have this amazing professor and this amazing opportunity to get to show up with him every day. I miss buying this guy frappuccinos and watching him start bouncing off the sides of the walls because he had so much sugar in his body. All right. So, Jeff, as you're wrapping it up, talk to us about this whole idea of purpose, meaning, and actually designing a life you want.
Hmm. Most people, they live aimlessly. We live in a world where your attention is one of the most valuable commodities you have because there's companies, there's corporations, there's people doing everything they can to get your attention so you can focus on their life, their product, what they're doing. And I'm someone who's purpose oriented. Everything I do it because I know that was a specific reason why I was created. And my goal is to fulfill that purpose because the way I view it is the world has 8 billion puzzle pieces and only I can fill in that one puzzle piece that belongs to me. And so my hope is that people will discover what that puzzle piece is for their life and that they would fit right in where they belong, not where other people tell them they belong.
Yeah. Here for a purpose, created for a purpose, a creator. Like, so what are you going to do with your time? And what are you going to do? So I am so thankful that you came and shared your story. And I want to remind everyone that's viewing this, if you're working on an idea, if you want to get control of your life, if you still have dreams inside of you, if you want to create more income or more impact, go ahead and check out how to start something. Click on a discovery session, talk to one of our coaches. We would love to help you. And every student out there that watches this, go check out who's on campus working with ideas and suck in all those free resources and work on your idea while you're there. All right? Be like Jeff. Thank you, Mr. Noël, for all our time. Have a great time in Nigeria. And the place where people can connect with you online is?
I'm sorry, repeat the question. I couldn't hear you.
Online, the best place to connect with you is?
Yes, connect with me on LinkedIn, Jefferson Noël, and also connect with me on Instagram at Jeff Noël Speaks.
All right. Have a great day. All right. Let's say goodbye.
Bye.
Woo!